Hey guys, welcome to the weekly question video. If you want to leave us a question, details on how to do that is down below, as well as a link to our Patreon if you want to get bonus content and support the channel further. And as always, like this video, subscribe, do all the things. It really does help out the channel. Last week I talked somewhat about our punishments and what we call corrections and all of that, and people really did give feedback that they wanted us to go into detail about what all that was. And so we are going to talk through our punishment system. What is a correction? What is a punishment? How do we go through that? What does it look like? What are all the details on that? Let's start with correction. A correction is a short spanking. It is still in our punishment system.
Yes.
Even though we say it's not a full punishment, it is still in the punishment system because it is a punishment. It is a consequence. But we call it a correction because it is a very short but swift spanking. It is not easy to take. It's a lot, you know. Do you do corrections at the same intensity as a punishment?
I try to. Now, the reason I'm saying that I try to versus sometimes that's hard to measure, but I do try to make sure that I keep that same intensity because, as you just said, because it's a punishment, I want it to still have that same effect, even though that it's a smaller punishment, basically. But yeah, I always try to keep that intensity.
And so because he tries to keep that same intensity, it is very difficult to take. There's no warm-up with corrections. There's no warm-up with punishment either.
Either one.
But there is no warm-up. From the very first contact that paddle makes with me, it is intense. It is hard to take. Usually by the second, third, no longer than the fourth point of contact, I am really wishing that I had made better decisions and that I wasn't getting this correction. It is like immediate regret and immediate, like, I want this to be over right now, and it has just started. And so when Coda does a correction, it is a shorter form of spanking, so there's not a long lecture beforehand.
Is I try to figure out a way to make sure that I'm communicating effectively to say, this is why we're doing this, X, Y, and Z. Now let's go ahead and proceed in that. So I want her to absolutely know what's going on, but at the same time, I don't want it to be as long as a lecture that I would give for a full-blown punishment.
You really try to keep those, like, if you do any type of lecture, you try to keep it like under 30 seconds.
Yes,
you really try
right.
to just get right to the point.
Right to the point, exactly.
Because we don't do like different levels of punishment. We don't do mild, medium, hard, and severe like we did in the past.
That system was just way too complicated, and so we really just needed to simplify it, and this seems to really be working for us.
And so we just do correction and punishment. And so corrections really do act as those like less severe spankings because they're not full punishments. But because of that, Coda needs to, number one, make it count because it's a lot shorter.
Right.
And number two, the point of having correction is to be able to accomplish the goal of correcting my behavior in a very short amount of time that doesn't disrupt the flow of our day as much as a punishment does.
Correct. Yeah.
And so after he kind of gives me a very brief, like few sentences, 30 seconds or under, like, this is why this is happening, this is why I don't accept it, you know, let's get started. It is a 3-minute spanking. Now, Coda does like to take a brief pause right in the middle where he will re-emphasize his point, re-emphasize what's expected of me. So we do build in like 15 seconds in between. So it's a minute and a half, 15 seconds for him to kind of say what he needs to say, and then a minute and a half. The way we have structured it is that minute and a half of continual spanking happens on just one side of my bottom.
That's the truth.
It's so awkward to kind of talk about, but it happens on one side of my bottom where he will just spank like the left side. and for that minute and a half. And then after that 15 seconds where he can kind of reemphasize his point, he will spank my right side for the last minute and a half, and then the spanking is done. We do use a timer. It is a like a gym timer, so we have been able to program, like, it will cycle through. So he pushes start, and it cycles through minute and a half, and then it goes to that 15-second break, and then it cycles the last minute and a half, and then the timer goes off automatically.
It's very, very cool how you can program it and do that. It's really, really good.
So that is a correction. Again, it's not easy to take. It's not fun. I don't look forward to them. It is not something that I look at as no big deal. It is definitely something that I don't want to have to go through, but I would much prefer that over a punishment.
The implement that I decide to use for correction is, we have a small acrylic paddle that has holes in it. And that's the one that I always go to. So that's the implement that I use, and that's been kind of my go-to. And so what I tell all head of households is, you don't have to change it up. If you find one that you believe is effective and it's working and that you feel like you've really used well, just stick with that. So.
Now, our punishment system is similar, but longer. And so what we have done in our punishment system is, from the advice of friends that we're talking to, we have started doing what we call a zone system. So we've modified what they do to fit what will work for us. But basically, we have kind of broken down the surface area of the target in question here. It's so awkward to be like, my bottom. It is, but we've broken that into 4 specific areas. And so it's really like the kind of like lower part of my bottom, and then like what would be considered the sit spot. Those are our zones. So we've kind of broken that, and then the right side and the left side. And so for punishments, what Coda does is he will give a slightly longer lecture, because punishments are for more serious behaviors. And so he wants to emphasize. I still think that you try to just keep it to a couple of minutes.
I do.
You really don't try to drag out the lecture.
Nope.
Because part of the reason we started using this system was to simplify how we were approaching punishment, and to make it to where punishments weren't taking so long.
Part of the reason for that is that, at least for me as the head of household, it was actually setting me up for failure, because I was always tending to go more lenient on punishments because our punishment took so long. One of the things that we cut down as a part of that too was the lecture, and that's good, because Aria will tell you I'm getting better, but I have a hard time getting short, sweet, and to the point. And so this helps me do that, and it also helps us be a lot more effective in punishment, and it makes it to where I'm not wanting to necessarily not lean into it because it's going to take so long.
And so when the punishment actually starts, when Coda is like, okay, let's get this going, he has me get into position. We have on that same timer, we have another setting to where it is our punishment setting that he can push play on that setting, and it cycles through to where each of those zones he focuses on for 2 minutes. So it will be continual spanking in that zone for 2 minutes. And then there is a short break. I want to say it's 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Yep, that's correct.
And that's just to give me a chance to catch my breath, because the intensity that he spanks me at for punishment is severe. Every punishment is severe. Now, I know that Coda has the capacity to spank me harder than he does. So I know that if I really crossed a line, if I did something extremely egregious, then my punishments could be worse, but they are pretty darn unbearable. Punishment really does start at like my capacity, and it grows in intensity. And so it takes me beyond what I can bear, what I can handle. And it's designed that way on purpose, because to get a punishment, I have to really do something pretty extreme. Like it takes a lot for Coda to decide to actually punish me. And so when he does, he makes it count.
And so I also want to mention that the same implement that I use for correction, I use for these zones because it's kind of the same area. And so I feel like it works really, really well.
And so our timer cycles through 2 minutes, 30 seconds, 2 minutes for all 4 of those zones. And one thing that this has done is it builds the intensity. It makes it extremely unbearable. It makes it very, very intense, very, very painful, which makes the punishment more effective. But it also actually protects my skin from being damaged.
Absolutely. We've had a lot more success in that area since we've done that. It's actually very, very good.
Because it creates the intensity with less actual impact.
It's a really good system. It really is.
And so after those 4 zones have been gone through for 2 minutes, then he takes another 30 seconds, maybe to a minute break, and then he does the zones again. And so he cycles through those zones twice. Sometimes he will switch implements. Sometimes it's the same implement. We have a few different paddles that he can choose from for that purpose, but he'll go through the zones again at the 2 minutes per zone. And then after that, then we have a long paddle that extends both sides of my bottom. And he will use that. I think we have been doing 10 swats with that long paddle as our minimum number.
Yeah.
I think we talked last time about that increasing to 20.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
We did. And just so you guys know, that smaller acrylic paddle that I was talking about that I use the zones for, this one's just longer. It's almost the exact same thing. It has holes in it, but it's just longer.
It feels very different, though.
It does. Oh, absolutely. But aesthetically, that's what it looks like. So.
And so he'll do 20 swats with that long paddle. He does kind of alternate to where the impact of the swat is hitting a different side each time. But he's standing on the same side of me, and so it makes it to where the impact is felt regardless. And that is very hard to take, especially after going through the zones. It is a lot of impact on just, again, it's a different sensation, so it just feels different, but it feels very much awful. It's a different kind of awful. And again, after about the second one of those, I'm like, oh, can we just be over? But we're not, because after he goes through that, then he will switch to one last implement, and typically that is a cane.
A cane, yep.
And it's I want to say it's an 18-inch
I think you're right.
Cane.
I think you're right, yeah. So I believe it's 20 and 20, but we've talked about just like upping on the longer paddle, we're going to up it from 20 to 30 to 30 in both those areas.
Now, we have friends that time out their time with the
Which
cane.
you can totally do, by the way.
We just prefer to have it counted because of that's just Coda's preference.
But if you want to time it, we're not saying that that's wrong. Like, totally do that. That we, like we said, we know some couples that are doing that. Just do again what's best for you, and you're taking it in hand. So.
And so, yeah, so it's going to be 30 on each side. And the way we do it to prevent wrapping, there is a way to prevent wrapping without doing it this way. So you just have to find the technique that works for you. But what works for us to absolutely guarantee that there's going to be no wrapping, because when the cane wraps, it has a tendency to cut skin.
Right. Right.
You can't really get around that reality.
Just does.
And so in order to prevent that wrapping, what we do is Coda will stand on my left side when he is hitting my left side, and he focuses the target of where he is hitting to that left side. And so it'll be 30 on that side. And then he actually walks around to my right side and will hit from my right side onto my right side.
Right.
If that makes any sense at all. I feel like that was a little rambly, but it usually makes sense in the end. And that way, the tip of the cane is always pointed like inward. It's not, the tip of the cane is not being focused
On the outward.
on the outside of my hip, because that's where we tried it once with Coda just going straight across both sides, but because that tip was pointed towards my hip, it was wrapping and it did cut skin. And so we wanted to prevent that. And that is the best way that we have found. Now, eventually, with more experience and more practice, Coda may find that he's able to aim it in a way that could prevent wrapping by going across both sides at the same time. But right now, that is how we have found that absolutely 100% guarantees that there's no wrapping and that he can aim appropriately to be able to get what he wants out of the experience. Like he gets the reaction he is looking for from me. It is creates the sensation that he wants to create, and it prevents any actual skin damage from happening.
Yeah, so that's it. That's our correction and punishment systems, and we're always tweaking. We're always thinking of how to do things more effective. But there it is. We might do an update in the future if things change. But that's it right there. Thank you for the question.